Welcome to the Cabinet meeting of Lichfield District Council. I shall start with, do we have any apologies for absence? Anything you know about, Will?
Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Pullen.
Okay, that is why I'm chairing the meeting, as it happens. Okay, agenda item 2. Do we have any declarations of interest for any papers this evening? Simon?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's a non-pecuniary interest in item 4. I am a director on the council's wholly owned company, LWM.
Okay. Councillor Farrell?
Yeah, it comes as no surprise to you. Same interest on the chair of the LWM.
Okay, excellent. Now, Kerry?
And finally, also a director on LWM. Yes, so the same interest as Simon Fletcher.
Okay, very good. Item 3 is Money Matters Financial Monitoring. Now, Councillor Strachan, I think, hasn't quite made it yet. I think he's on the way. So if that's okay with everybody, I'm gonna move this lower down the agenda to give him a chance to get here from work. And we'll move on to item 4, which is Lichfield West Midlands Annual Report 2023-2024, which I believe is down to me as the shareholder representative to the council. Okay, so this report sets out a review of the annual report of the council's trading company. It sets out a review of how the company's in 23-24, and also it talks about what the company will be doing for 24-25. Section 3.3 of the Coven report, to that shows the services that are currently being provided by the company. Section 3.4 of the Coven report shows services that the company will add to its portfolio during the year 24-25. On page 19 of the actual report, you will see a summary of the accounts, which I'm sure that Councillor Strachan and Auntie will answer any questions on. In summary, for my part, the trading company has had a very, very good second year. I think we can all see that from the report. I'd like to pass on my congratulations to the entire team involved, people in this room and everybody else. Let's remember, when the trading company does better, the council does better, from being able to provide better services and receiving dividends back from the trading company. Remember, the trading company has only one shareholder, which is the council. So as the company does better, so as the council, and of course the most important bit, so do our residents and the taxpayer. I think I'm going to hand over to Councillor Farrell now, who is a director of the trading company, if he wants to add a few words.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Smith. I think you've put it pretty fantastically there. It's a really good report. Obviously, it's nothing to do with me, just as the chairman of the board, but myself and my fellow directors have overseen lots of really hard work here. Highlights in the report: we've got nearly 170 staff members at this time. The 3 new services that you mentioned as well. As you rightly highlighted, all of the money made goes back to the council in dividends, and it's just going in the right direction. I think that my fellow directors will probably say something else, but you know, there's a lot of detail in this report. You'll see a nice draft of a statement from me, my fellow directors, just praising really the team. You know, we can't praise the team highly enough. They are moving everything in the right direction, bringing in more money for the council, and also a much better way of delivering our services for our residents. So yeah, a really good report. I might say something else in a minute, but I'll leave it there for now.
Fantastic. Do any other directors of the company want to make any further comment, or if not, I will go to any questions from any of the cabinet or comments. Councillor Sylvester Hall.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, having a read through this, it's such a comprehensive list of all the different services, and I note that we're looking at reviewing and approving the actual report that's through today. There's a significant ramping up between 2 years, and when I say significant, that's probably an understatement as well. You're going from sort of 500,000-ish to 4.8 million. Because sort of a bit of context for us, other than from the report itself, about where the majority of that's coming from, the activity. I'm conscious of the fact that we've already discussed in the past, for example, disabled facilities grants and other initiatives, and the phenomenal amount of work that's gone into transforming people's lives ultimately from those, as to where the majority of that work lies potentially, if that's possible. As my first question, if I may.
No
Chair.
problem. Simon.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So as the report sets out, in the last year, trading year, there were a number of key services, I suppose. DFG's Disabled Facilities Grants does make up a large chunk of the financial spend of the company. The other large proportion of the money being spent is on leisure services. So last April, we brought the 2 leisure centres that the council owns back in-house from a third party that was previously providing them. Frankly, they weren't being provided adequately enough for our residents, so the decision was made to bring them back in-house. And actually, those leisure services have really started to blossom, I think, over the last year as well. Our revenue has increased significantly by about 12% on the previous year. But more importantly, the centres have become community hubs again, which is what they should be in communities such as Lichfield, from my perspective. Those 2, though, contribute the vast majority of the budget.
And Chair, if I may, one of the points that I noticed in there at 3.5 was looking at, in addition to the new service areas, we've got a creation of a new ecology brokerage service. I suppose a little bit of promotion as well for that, but if you could just give us a bit more information, that would be ace.
Yeah, again, Chair, please. Yes, I'm absolutely delighted that we've now got a brokerage for ecology. I'm also pleased that in the paragraph above that our planning consultancy is starting to take off as well. But yeah, the brokerage service is all about making sure that as we accept housing development, which we have to in all parts of the country, we do not lose important biodiversity. So the brokerage is about ensuring that any lost biodiversity is replaced. And essentially the brokerage element of that is matching housing developers with landowners who've got land that they would be willing to see converted into habitat banks and that type of thing as well for important biodiversity. I think we've now got the broker has been in place now for about 4 or 5 months, as we've identified 3 or 4 first or initial habitat banks, which is really exciting. And over the next 30 years or so, those habitat banks will be protected for the population of the district.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Simon. Any more questions or comments?
No, thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Simon, I think we spoke about this offline previously, but the growth in staff, 170, that in itself must give challenges with the large input of staff over such a short period of time. And how have you coped with that? And also the cultural side of things. I just wondered if you could give us a bit of background to your challenges in that area, please.
Yes, thank you. This is going to be cathartic for me, if nothing else, for the next couple of minutes. But no, there are 2 organisations, the council and the company. We work closely, but they are distinctly different organisations. One is clearly commercial, the other one is they're both providing public services, but one is doing it in a more commercial way than the other. We've been acutely aware that getting the culture right in the company is really important, particularly around key services like leisure, where we were really struggling for a positive culture, and that was clearly obvious, I would say, to users of the leisure centres pre last April. Now, engagement with staff on an ongoing basis is really important to us. So we've got a staff forum, which has got representation from across the business, as it were, and that meets us on a bi-monthly basis as well to talk about any issues, to talk about new services that are coming online, or actually to help us to understand how we can improve some of those services as well, because lots of the, well, if not all of the best ideas tend to come from staff who are working in those services. So we do that. I do that as the managing director. I meet the staff forum 6 times a year. But in addition to that, we have a very strong sort of management culture in the organisation as well, with some great management information. So I'm getting regular briefings, which I share with my fellow directors, about the performance of the individual services, where they're struggling, and any opportunities and weaknesses as well. Okay.
Thank you, Simon. Councillor Farrell, did you say you wanted to add something at the end? Or?
I'll save it to the end. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have any more? Sorry, Councillor Cox.
Yes, sorry, I'm down this end. I wanted to just pick up on the leisure. I mean, obviously, I see that as a positive for sure. But exactly in terms of breakdown between the 2 leisure centres of Burntwood Leisure and Centre and the Friary Grange, Can I assume that obviously it's the Burntwood Leisure Centre that is our main return on it, or is membership reasonably good at the Friary? Because you know, we have to recognise the Friary, our investment there is going to be diverted, rightfully so. But I just wanted to be sure where the break, how that figure's made up. Are we looking at high percentage Burntwood, low percentage, or what?
Chair, so yeah, that's exactly right, Councillor Cox. We've got about 1,400, 1,500 members who are based out of Burntwood Leisure Centre. To be fair, Friary Leisure is doing rather well though, given the constraints that we've got there in terms of space and some of the quality of the accommodation that we're working out of. They've got about 400 members this month in the Friary as well. Our expectation, for those of you that attended the groundbreaking for our new leisure centre last week, is that when we get that up and running in 12 months' time, we will get a spike of more members from a Lichfield perspective as well. So that balance will start to work itself out nicely. At the moment, though, yeah, the majority of revenue is being generated by residents in Burntwood or people who are coming to Burntwood Leisure Centre.
But yeah, I'll just add to that, as in my with my cap on as portfolio holder for leisure, that yeah, there's a lot of things to indicate that when given where we are with Burntwood Leisure Centre, when our new leisure centre in Lichfield opens, we will see we're confident we'll see a significant hike in the membership of that, which I think is key to Rob's report in a minute as well. So we think we'll see that, just because new facility will be schemes to promote new membership, and we think that'll be quite popular. So we're looking forward to seeing those results. Yeah.
And just as a supplementary, obviously going forward, I think it's important to recognise that leisure centres, wherever they are only really as good as the fabric that surrounds it in terms of what the offer is, because people are interested in hygiene and so forth. And obviously I wouldn't like to think that we slipped into ways where the Friary Grange, I'll be honest, isn't. You question yourself why you're in the changing rooms, etc. And I do concern that. And I would like to think that we are making sure that as we have a new leisure centre, that Burntwood Leisure Centre has the attention that it deserves to ensure that it is also a welcoming place and it is offering what the public want.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I'll take that one, Simon. Yeah, I agree, and I see no issue with that. Let's not forget that Burntwood Leisure Centre has recently just had a revamp as well, and a refit, and we've done a lot of work there, and we will absolutely continue in the future to make sure it stays that high standard, because you're quite right. That was a problem with the previous operator, I believe, that the levels dropping off, and that's why they were losing members. And we've seen, as we've taken over and done our first revamp, we've seen those memberships increase. So completely agree, Councillor Cox.
And I'd like to obviously that work that was done, what needed to be done, because even through the youth council, young members were actually saying, well, we're now going out of the district, by the way, to get leisure, because going to Shire Oak. And that's sad in many ways, that you have a great facility as Burntwood Leisure Centre, yet previous management of it had let it slip. And I want to make sure that we hold that, getting it back and maintain it going forward.
Good point, Cascott. Simon, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, I won't prolong it. I just wanted, in case there anybody watching this meeting as well, the directors are acutely aware that the wet side changing rooms in Burntwood Leisure Centre lets down the leisure centre. It is one of our key priorities to work with the council to identify budget to do something about that. So I'm just plugging that, if I may, Chair.
Noted. Got it. Okay. Any more questions or comments? I'm looking around the room. No. Councillor Farrell.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to see if temporary accommodation was going to be brought up, because I'm quite excited about how that's going to help us as a council in the coming months and years, to be quite honest. Because the demand for temporary accommodation is growing, and I hope that LWMTS can do their bit to help out the district. And I just want to extend my thanks really to Simon and Kerry as the directors, because LWMTS is the council for all intents and purposes. That's why I'm the chairman of it, and that's why you're the shareholder representative. and Kerry and Simon, the directors, because we are running this as an arm of the council to effectively deliver services in a great way and in many cases a streamlined way, but also to make money for the council and you know, good value for our taxpayers. So I think that this shows that that's going in the right direction, and I'm looking forward to, as we move forward in the next few years with the company, hopefully delivering more and more services in a really good way, to be honest. So I think this is, as Councillor Sylvester Hall said earlier, a big jump from last year's review to this year's, and I hope next year's will go in the same direction.
Thank you, Councillor Farrell. We shall watch this space on that. Excellent. So in that case,
Can I step in on a point of information on a
sorry, Councillor Strachan.
tangentially affected point on the issue of temporary accommodation and the radically increased costs that we as a district council and of course other district councils across the country are experiencing. We have, I understand they're being written today. We have written to both constituency MPs in Lichfield and in Tamworth, expressing the concerns on behalf of Lichfield District Council and the District Council's network about the radically increased costs, which we cannot now recoup in some ways, and so they will be going out shortly, and I'll publish those across cabinet when we can.
Thank you. Thank you for the update, Councillor Strachan. Okay, given that, then we have one recommendation, which is that the cabinet reviews the Traded Service Limited annual report for 23-24 and approves its publication. Can I have a show of hands, please? Thank you. Right, then we shall wind back in time to item 3, Money Matters 2024-25, financial monitoring. Councillor Strachan.
Thank you, Councillor Smith, and sorry that I was a minute or two late. It was not much fun trying to get out of Birmingham today. This is the Q1 report for our performance against the financial strategy. So it's the first three months of the financial year, and reveals very much that we remain in a robust financial position. And as Anthony details, there are no significant financial risks either to ourselves or to Lichfield West Midlands Traded Services financial performance across the numbers before you. You will see there is a small movement on our reserves. That's touched on in the report, and it's in detail at paragraph 3.5. But effectively, any shortfalls are currently being met from reserves. And the particular big ticket item that you'll see down there is our radically increased insurance premiums, which is costing us £105,000 extra per year, simply because of changes in that sector. Anyone who has renewed their car insurance recently has probably also seen that on a personal level. It's been touched on in the meeting, so I won't go on to it in huge detail, but of course, our income across the leisure portfolio is £379,000 below budget. That is currently being met from the earmarked reserve from our former partners, Freedom Leisure. It is largely based around the specific site at Friary Grange and how much it costs to actually keep that building open. Given its age and current situation. But again, also as we touched on, progress on delivering the new leisure centre has begun. The ground cutting ceremony took place. Construction on that should be starting very shortly. I would urge from the finance portfolio that be brought forward at pace, and would mention to Cabinet and indeed to any councillor that further delays on that project are not merely hurting the project, they are hurting the council as a whole. And so it really is of paramount importance that be delivered, because the new centre should be considerably more efficient than the aged infrastructure that we're currently working in. Perhaps not unusually for a financial report, there is some significant capital programme slippage. The receipt from the sale of Venture House is once again delayed, although I am reassured that transaction should be taking place in the near future. And the capital spend on the Birmingham Road site is once again delayed, but again, I'm reassured that should be spooling up throughout the autumn. I'm sure if there are any questions about the slightly different accounting performance of rather than a notional item, the fact that we're doing an asset swap effectively, Anthony, I'm sure will pick up on the detail on that and make it as easy to understand. I've mostly got my head around it. Subject to the approval of the pedestrianisation paper, which is up next, the capital expenditure for that will be met by our environment, which is detailed at paragraph 3.33. Although I would reassure Cabinet that if funding does become available from other sources, it's not fatal to those projects. We're just borrowing from them in the short term to meet the more urgent spend. Touching very briefly on capital performance, it is very early days in the financial year. However, we are currently seeing a small surplus on the business rates collection fund. Of course, we never budget for any surplus. You'll see that the approved budget is nil. And so that additional income will be extremely useful. That is netted off by a small deficit on the council tax collection fund. But again, I'd reassure you all, this is month 3. It is very, very early days. Our payment of our suppliers within 30 days is at the highest rate that it has ever been after the directorate that was lagging behind has dragged itself up by its bootstraps. That is currently at 93.35%. We do, of course, have that informal target that should be 100%, but we are above the key performance indicator of 90% that we set ourselves, and so sure we'll continue to drag that up. And members, you'll see within the recommendations, the Better Care Fund grant is £169,000 higher than we were expecting it to be. So that is now 1.21 million. That is to go into the Disabled Facilities Grant project, which is an incredibly high performing service now. And I look forward to seeing that increased grant being spent for the benefit of those who need it. I don't know whether Anthony wants to step in now and deal with swaps before we take any questions.
Might as well if it's going to come on. So when we were doing the accounting treatments for the asset swap, part of the reports, there's effectively 2 ways you can treat the asset swap. You can treat it as 2 separate transactions, so an acquisition and a sale. The proceeds from the sale fund the acquisition, or you can treat it as a linked transaction and just swap one asset for the other. I took the view that the former of those 2 options was the right one to follow. But we subsequently got some expert advice because this is quite a technical, unusual transaction. And the advisors have said, try the other option. So that's why we've got the change. It doesn't have any impact on the resources we've got available. It's a book entry within the accounts. So there's no impact on any of the projects in the capital programme.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Okay, just before I let you go, Councillor Cecil, just to come back on the leisure. Councillor Strachan, you're quite right. As you said previously, when the new leisure centre is online, it'll run a lot more efficiently in terms of the costs, and we'll have a higher membership level as well. So we'll get greater income, and we're also not paying the money we have to pay to the Academy Trust at the moment for the shared site at the Ferrari Grange. So all those are positive, and we're looking to have a positive income rather negative income on that when that's complete. And you do have my word. The new leisure facility will be completed between 12 and 14 months from now. So you have my word that I will keep on top of the project managers and the constructors to ensure that happens.
We will hold you to that.
Sorry, Councillor Sylvester Hull.
Thank you, Chair. Just to start with, the usual thanks, because I think that the frequent reporting of this is so helpful to me, generally as a cabinet member, also as a member within the council, and given the circumstances collectively and nationally, locally, I think it's right and proper that we do keep that close watch on it. But looking at things like no significant financial risks to be reported, ACE. And then later on in the report, we've got about the investment liquidity section and the council's not had to temporarily borrow. And all of those, I think, are worthwhile recognising as well as positives for how we are performing at the moment. You've already mentioned the part about increase to the insurance premiums, because that I just thought was the amount that it's gone up by was significant. But if we can just maintain with the asset swap to start off with, I appreciate the transactional information to that one, but if I was looking in 3.28, we've got that the budget has increased as the properties being acquired have been revalued upwards, and we've got a figure of 435k over there. So I think just a bit of context to that would be really helpful for that particular one. And then if I can come back afterwards as well, please, Chair.
Of course.
That's okay.
Well, I'm going to let the technical accountant handle the technical accounting question.
So again, when we did the asset swap in the cabinet papers, we had 2 valuations that were provided by the valuer, and the value that was attributed to the 6 leasehold units that we were going to acquire compared to the freehold for the Acres Lane site, excluding Debenhams and the 6, were roughly the same. So, however, there's been a subsequent valuation which presumably takes account of more recent circumstances by a valuer that has increased the value. So the value of the properties that we will acquired gone up by 400,000. However, we promptly knocked down 4 of those, so that value will drop back down in any case. So it's a little bit of you gain on one hand, you lose on the other, but that's part of the development proposal, to be honest. So I think what it demonstrates is we got a good deal in the asset swap.
Thank you, Anthony.
Absolutely, and that was the part that I was thinking was worthwhile making sure that we're recognising. The DFG side of things, again, I know we've already touched on that in the previous paper as well, but that additional investment I think is going to make a significant difference. We can already see what the differences that have been made so far. The only other variance that I was looking at that I thought, the question on that one was the ICT side of things. We know at the moment that we're having to do an awful lot to make sure that our electronic systems are protected and safe and secure. And on that particular one, I think there's about 83k that which was the variance on there as to making sure that we are still doing everything that we need to do in the time frame that we do, knowing that some of those financials have changed from what we originally intended.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't really know what to say about that.
Yeah.
Taking your DFG point first, it's incredibly welcome. This is an area where a little actually does go a long way. And so even that increase of 190,000 is likely to go a significant distance to actually improving the lives and accessibility of a number of properties. In terms of IT, I can't speak to the specific nature of the projects, but I can speak to the fact that it's identified as a strategic risk to the authority. It's touched on in our strategic risk register, which we take to the audit committee. It is something that was absolutely paramount, given the amount of personal data that we handle, that we make sure that the systems that we have are as safe as they possibly can be. And so I would imagine that is the heart of that spend, unless anybody's about to correct me.
Will be quite a chunk of it when Kerry can come with. There will be quite a chunk of it is refresh the laptops and any hardware we've got around the building. So partly to improve efficiency and improve functionality, but partly to safeguard against risks of cyber and nature.
Kerry, do you want to add something?
Yes, just to add to what's already been said, and I say cybersecurity is a key corporate priority for us. We have over the last 12 to 18 months invested in improving both the hardware and the software available to our staff to, as we say, support our staff to be as efficient and effective as possible. As Anthony said, we rolled out new laptops, we've improved the Wi-Fi provision in District Council House and some of our security as well. We've been working really hard to do various health checks on our IT systems to make sure we're as secure as we possibly can be. So it's been a huge amount of investment. We're also looking at how we safely migrate to cloud-based options as well, but again doing that in a very considered way to make sure we're understanding any cyber security risks before we start to migrate software and data.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Kerry. Thank you, Councillor Strachan. Thank you, Anthony. Councillor Whitehouse.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Under 1.7, Councillor Strachan, the figure of 1.8 million is a very healthy figure compared with a budget of nil. Just wondered if you could give a little bit of background as to how we budget or why we budget for nil, and yet we've achieved a surplus of 1.8 million.
Well, some of that has been largely because the potential for revision to the business rates regime has been very much on the radar for at least the last, 5-6 years. We have expected it to happen with probably little notice for all of those years. We have had the benefit of being able to retain that business rates income over the last few years, and it has been very welcome. It's probably bailed us out of a significant financial black hole by being able to retain that. But we still budget nil because we're pessimists, and nobody quite knows what's going to happen in the sector in the near future.
Keep going, Councillor Whitehouse.
On that basis, 1.8 is what would we expect that? Is that a figure that is realistic for what we're trying to achieve?
It has been the ballpark for the last couple of years, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chairman. On the council tax collections, very much news, I think it was last night, where those that made default on their by even just a month are reported that they would then be expected to pay in full. Can I be assured we're not taking that very stringent, because there must be obviously reasons for a default we could talk about, but then to insist that they not going to default again because we're going to take the whole lot. It worries me that if that's the perception of all councils, then our reputation is going to be pretty damned from the beginning. Can I be assured that we as a council are more sympathetic towards our council tax?
Absolutely, Councillor Cox. That has never been the position of this authority, nor will it be on my watch. I very much take the view, and I think it's shared by officers within the revenues and benefits area, that we should look for compassion first. You will know that the law gives us stringent and draconian powers when it comes to people who aren't paying council tax, which is of course a statutory crown debt. But we have never ever thrown our weight around in that way, nor will we. We're far more likely to look at ways to smooth payments, to assist people out of debt using our discretionary powers, which you may recall we increased to the tune of nearly £1 million last year. And so we will be doing everything that we can to assist people struggling to pay council tax and not take them to court, because ultimately you will never ever recover that money from someone who is in difficulty, and frankly you're just making their quality of life so much worse by effectively seeking criminal conviction for non-payment of council tax. So yes, that is not our policy, nor will it be.
Thank you, Councillor Strachan, and obviously the message is that it's not a ticket for everybody to fulfil their payment or so forth, but I'm reassured because it would worry me within the Lichfield district that our perception of being a fair council is maintained.
No, absolutely.
And not to be classified as a heartless.
Absolutely, you have still got to pay. It's not going to go away.
No,
It is a
absolutely.
crown debt. But as Adam Hart Davis taught us, tax doesn't have to be taxing. Which is the watchword. So we will make it as easy as possible for people to access that support if they need it, as well as making sure they discharge that debt.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Strachan. Thank you, Councillor Cox. Councillor Whitehouse.
Thank you. Just changing tack a second to the risk register, Councillor Strachan. Risk register SR3J. Government and regulatory bodies introduce significant changes to the operating environment. Clearly, with the changes to government and the uncertainty of previous years and potentially years going forward, how practically can us as a council get close to the decision makers and make our feeling known and try and influence policy in that sort of area?
Well, Anthony, as Section 151 officer, carries out regular daily horizon scanning exercises for any potential changes. We don't necessarily get early intelligence of changes, but we do get consulted on things. Today, in fact, we submitted our advanced budget consultation with responses are specifically tailored to Lichfield and the situation in which we find ourselves. So that will be going into central government. I've asked for a copy to go to both of our MPs so that they're aware of the situation that we're in and the risks that we face. In terms of getting close to the decision makers, we respond to every consultation that we are sent. We are going to continue to lobby our MPs as much as we possibly can do. We are engaged within the Local Government Association and the District Councils Network, who are both bodies of influence, who are lobbying authorities in the sector and who are consultees in the sector. We protect ourselves as much as we can by knowing as much as we can in advance, by planning for potentially the worst. Anthony is probably the best catastrophizer I know. And in terms of how he approaches what could possibly go wrong with massive reform in the sector, you've seen we budget for nil on business rate retentions. It may be that that's slightly optimistic in the fullness of time, but we certainly plan in advance for what could possibly go wrong, and we talk to as many people as possible to try and make sure it doesn't.
Thank you, Councillor Strachan. Okay, before I go back to you for your recommendations, Councillor Whitehouse, any more?
No, thank you.
Okay, excellent. Councillor Strachan, would you like to take us through your recommendations in section 2, please?
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I move recommendations 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3 standing in my name.
Excellent. Can I have a show of hands, please? Very good.
Thank you.
Right, we move on to the final item, which is Lichfield City Centre pedestrianisation. Councillor Sylvester Hall is going to give us an update on where we are.
Thank you very much, Chair. Colleagues, really pleased to be able to bring this paper to Cabinet this evening. I think the first part of what I need to say is that there have been many that have contributed to the pedestrianisation scheme through the experimental traffic regulation order over the past 18 months. And when I originally looked at this and thought it's a trial for 18 months, that seems like a long time. Actually, that 18 months has gone by very quickly, including the consultation periods in them. I've approached this as a collective scheme, and I've been pleased by the level of engagement and involvement by the many different stakeholders, quite different and yet similar in some of their needs. And to those in particular, a thank you for their engagement, but also to recognise my appreciation to the officers that have been involved as well. We've been able to deliver some, I think, very effective dialogue and that meaningful consultation, which has delivered us to where we are this evening. I do appreciate that you've had sight of the Cabinet paper and also the frequently asked questions that have accompanied it. But if I can just take a few moments to highlight some of the information. And in particular, if I could just bring your attention to on the recommendations, just for accuracy on this particular one, but on 2.4, the task, and it's got for Cabinet Member for Visitor Economy, that should be colleges, the second one on, just as a minor point, but just for accuracy for when we look at the recommendations later. The ultimate ambition with progressing the pedestrianisation scheme is to make the city even more vibrant, welcoming and attractive to visitors and shoppers. And the experimental traffic order to date has given us some very useful information. And the proposal this evening is that we make that a permanent TRO, and that is approved. As part of that, I think it's important that we just go through and highlight how we intend to effectively implement the TRO, and that's with the supply and installation of the rising bollard system within the city centre. There is also the ambition to look at the options of making Ball Street two-way, and those are going to be ongoing and also covered in part of the recommendations that we included in this evening's paper. I think the physical operation of how we put through the scheme is what is also going to be critical to the success, and making sure that those are given access to the city can do so when they wish to. That's the important part on those. With a system of either fobs to majority stakeholders being permit holders, PIN numbers to delivery drivers primarily, and an intercom system for the blue badge holders, that will be the majority of the stakeholders and how we are looking at facilitating their access using the rising bollard system. As a brief aside, it's also given us opportunity to take a holistic look at how we operate some of the other operations functions that are covered, such as parking, enforcement and CCTV. And I'm pleased to see that's been considered in the round, but separate to what we're considering this evening, but equally an instrumental part of doing so. In terms of the costings for it, we've already had mentioned previously, one of the earlier items, the sale of Levitt's Field. We'll be looking at acknowledging the cost factors that's been put through for these. And with a consultation with other members and also pedestrianisation task group recently, had opportunity to look at the costings that have been formulated again by the officers, and how the installation of the rising bollards will be making sure that we're given that ability to prevent access for those that don't need to come through the city to those that do. We've also been able to gain some very useful data by the gate staff that have been operating since November last year as to how many people are coming through to the city. And we can see that since the pedestrianisation scheme came in from its March version, so it has been changed based on the feedback that we've had to date, that there has been a significant reduction in vehicles coming through the city. And we can also recognise as well the times in which they're doing so. That is, of course, for when we have that data available. There are key times when we haven't, but we have had significant feedback separately during part of the operations to do with the nighttime economy as well. So the original ambition to deliver the vibrant economy of Lichfield, I think we are looking at making that a massive step closer as far as pedestrianisation. And I would welcome any questions from Cabinet members to do with the pedestrianisation scheme as we take that forwards and on the proposals and the recommendations this evening.
Councillor Hall, thank you. Thank you very much for your detailed overview of the report. I'll just say very quickly that I think I'm really pleased to see the pedestrianisation finally come forward to the permanent TRO. I have a couple of questions and queries, but I'm going to put it out there to the Cabinet first to go for any questions, and I'll mop up what I think is left. Who would like to start? Councillor Farrell.
Thank you. Yeah, really pleasing to see this, Councillor Sylvester Hall. I think that, you know, one of the few benefits, if you can say that, of the COVID period was the increase in cafe culture, and I think that this proves that actually, if it's done right, you know, pedestrianisation of Lichfield city centre is a really good thing. Of course, there's going to be people that it affects, and not everyone's going to be happy with it for obvious reasons. But I was really pleased to see the various different business workshops and consultations that took place. So I've got just a couple of comments really. The first one is, you know, often people say that councils do consultations for the sake of consultations and they never listen, but clearly this isn't the case here. I want to ask just how helpful these consultations were, and just the question that's come to my mind now, and it could be me being silly, but in point 4.6 it talks about the 3,000 responses to the online feedback, which I think is a really good thing to get 3,000 responses. That's amazing. And looking at the, you know, 39% love the scheme, 21% like the scheme, and various different other percentages, it does seem like those percentages add up to 90 and not 100. So I wasn't sure where that missing 10 was, but largely I like the fact that you know, even though it doesn't please everyone and it's never going to, it looks like it's going in the right positive direction. So just a question about really the impact of those consultations.
I will also pick up on the pavement licenses side of things and the cafe culture, because that was one of the overriding ambitions with the pedestrianisation scheme that we were looking to be able to fulfil, and very much making sure that that is continued. Equally, every time I go out in the city, as no doubt a number of others do as well, you can see how that is increasing. And from the consultation point of view, we had, I think it was 4 pieces of feedback from the latest round when the March version of the ETRO was amended. So in terms of being able to engage, I think there has been some really effective dialogue, and we certainly need to make sure that we continue with that as we go through, if this paper's approved this evening, to make sure that the permanent TRO is also communicated effectively. We want to make sure that we're encouraging the ability for whether it's cafes, bars, some of the other places, to be able to operate what they're doing, not just inside the premises, but outside. And it's amazing to me when we look around and see certainly what's happened through the summer, but equally in the depths of winter, that will also be people who are enjoying being able to sit outside with the dogs and still be able to do that. So yeah, I'm pleased to see that we're making sure that that's continuing in some of the other aspects that we're operating from the council as well. I will also at any point invite, obviously, Kerry as the Chief Operating Officer to add to any of the comments that I'm making. Thank you for both of those.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Councillor Whitehouse.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Like everyone else, I think that the pedestrianisation scheme will bring so many benefits to the city, and the work that's been done in this by everyone is to be commended, because it is complicated getting so many different views together. Just the one point for me reading the recommendations is 2.3 and 2.4 sort of indicates that Boar Street is still work in progress very much. And I just wondered what your current thinking is as to how that matter will be progressed.
Yeah, so the chief exec's indication as well, but
Who
just.
wants to go first, the chief exec or you, Councillor Sylvester Hall?
Oh,
Go.
well, chief exec has just indicated he would like me to go first, so I
Go
think
for it.
thank you very much on that one. But I think just for a bit of context as well, is that when we started looking at the ETRO in its early days, some of the investigations that we did, some of the reports that were made originally said that realigning Boar Street wasn't necessarily as easy as what it was going to be, and prohibitive. I still think that there is options to be explored with those, and the latest reports that we've had indicate that it can be, with some careful and considered realignment that needs to be done. Having said that, if we wanted to make it so that the entrance to it will allow two-way traffic of a larger variety as well, that would take far more involved realignment civils, and some of those I think would be prohibitive, because you're also then including potentially moving the pedestrianisation crossing, and that is unlikely to be considered an appropriate thing in its round, including from the County Council as well, as detailed in the report. So the recommendations does say that we will continue to note the progress, and we'll continue to report on that. I thought it was keen that when we were putting together the final version of what we're proposing to be the permanent TRO, that it still maintained the element of Boar Street, but whilst continuing with the rising bollard installation in the meantime. But they are very much symbiotic in what they are trying to achieve by delivering the pedestrianisation scheme. And at that point, I will Chief Exec.
Thank you, Chair. Since the paper has been drafted, I've met with the Chief Executive from the County Council. I'm very grateful for his time. Actually, he came to Lichfield. We walked the site and had a look at the junction as well. So we were able to have a conversation about what we were trying to achieve through the pedestrianisation scheme, and the impact of not having a changed junction at Boar Street would have on our ability to actually deliver against all of our objectives. I'm really grateful, as I say, that he came out to have a look. We had a really good conversation about it. He understands what we're trying to achieve, and he's taken that back to the district, to the county rather. I followed that up then with a written ask of the County Council and of the Chief Exec as well, and he responded very quickly saying that he's now got his officers working on it. So hopefully we're making progress.
Absolutely.
Yep. Thank you, Simon. Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to throw a spanner in, I think I might say is the expression, into the works. If we were to look at Boar Street as the possible remaining centre road that can be pedestrianised, is there not a call, and I know that we've been through it, I still think if you're going through pedestrianisation, do you look at it as pedestrianisation, or do you have a half-baked pedestrianisation? And Boar Street certainly does have those outlets that do have the on-street seating, pavement seating and so forth, that having a two-way becomes complicated in terms of traffic movements and everything else, and it then is no longer a nice environment that you might want to consider. So it's just, obviously I recognise the achievement that we've got so far, but you know, maybe that full pedestrianisation throughout the area is surely an ambition, because it will resolve in a lot of still outstanding issues when it comes to Boar Street, because Boar Street could be a bit of a sorry that I've thrown that in, but I think it's about, you know, keeping our options open.
So first of all, no need for the apology. at every time that we've had various consultations with various stakeholders, it's important that we get those individual viewpoints or collective, if it's a group of people that we're having those dialogues with. So I do think it is worthwhile making sure that we're recognising that. Ball Street in itself, the realignment at the moment potentially would suggest that the solution would involve a parallel parking as opposed to driving into the parking spaces that are identified at the moment. But that is a key area for our Blue Badge parking at your vicinity as well. So whilst we removed some of the others and we reallocated them to various other car parks in close proximity to the city, and also engaged with Access Able to make sure that where we needed to, that there were mitigating factors that were implemented very promptly, actually, to be able to facilitate those. That Ball Street is still very pivotal to that. So whilst we are very much looking at bringing this particular experimental traffic order to a permanent one, I still see the actual pedestrianisation scheme will always change. Pedestrianisation started in Lichfield a number of years ago, and this is another iteration of what we are looking at trying to achieve with those. At the moment, it is the case that Ball Street at this entrance point still poses a difficulty, and I think the overriding piece that we need to just bear in mind is that it's still being investigated, and that's where the recommendation comes from, as to looking at its distinct feasibility. I think at this point in time, it would be really helpful that we do have two-way in Ball Street, knowing that ultimately, you know, in the future that may change, but for now, I think that would be really helpful if we could. But at the same time, we also need to make sure that we are physically able to do so.
Thank you. And just to confirm, I don't overall have a personal view on this. I'm playing devil's advocate in terms of asking the questions.
Fair enough. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Councillor. I think it's quite correct that you've done that
Absolutely.
to flesh it out. Councillor Strachan.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Vesterhall, congratulations on bringing what has been an incredibly difficult experimental traffic restriction order to a point where we're now in a position to consider resolving to make it permanent. You certainly will have my support when we come to the proposals, but as other members have mentioned, it's quite clear that Ball Street is still very much a work in progress. Imagine my surprise to learn that it's not an official taxi rank, given that I think I've got taxis off Ball Street for about as long as I can remember. And that has engaged a thought in my mind, which I've only recently had, which is there a risk that taxi companies may have acquired a right to rank by prescription, by the fact they've used it for so long as a taxi rank? Have we taken steps to protect ourselves against that? Because of course, rights by prescription, prescriptive easements are acquired by long use. I know that certainly in terms of rights of way, it's 20 years. It may not be so long for this sort of thing, and are required without force, without stealth, but most importantly, without permission. And that's quite clearly the situation that we're in here. And so I don't want to be the council that this case is tested against. So I just wanted to make absolutely sure that we've covered ourselves on that. And the second is, I know that you refer in the frequently asked questions that we are considering alternative locations for taxis to rank, certainly when the bollards are in operation. Are you in a position at this stage to share that with Cabinet and share the thoughts with Cabinet, given that it's likely to engage people who may be blue badge holders or have limited mobility in the way that we've already made the concessions that we have on working on Ball Street? I'm sorry for asking what is a highly technical question without notice.
No, absolutely, which is why I'm ably assisted by our Chief Operating Officer and also the Chief Executive as well. So I think just to highlight the dialogue that we've had also with representatives of taxi drivers and especially of late, we realised when we had the recent food festival and taxis had to relocate because Ball Street was not available, that the need to have a formalised rank was absolutely paramount. And I'm looking at it in a short, medium and long term with regards to what the alternatives are. I can explain to you what some of those are this evening, but those conversations are continuing with the taxi driver representatives as well. We realise that they perform a significant service. We know that public transport in the Lichfield city centre tends to cease at 8:30 at night. And for those who are coming in, we want to make sure that they do have the ability to do so and travel back home afterwards, having had a wonderful evening in our time economy in Lichfield. But the immediate alternative is outside the old library in the bus stops. And again, there's been conversations taking place with some of the bus operators as well to make sure that they can do so safely when they're operating their own service during the time that there might be a crossover between taxis being there as well as the bus stops coming through. We know that there will be a period of time for when the bollards are installed that we'll need to maintain access for the taxis into Ball Street. And I think it would also be worthwhile just acknowledging the fact that when we've had conversations previously, including with local law enforcement as well, that we will engage with those to make sure that we are trying to facilitate as best as we can that safe operation for both the drivers and also the people who are using them as well. In the medium term, then we are looking at alternatives such as to the Burr Street car park to the back of B&M, and looking at what we can do to make sure that the access and entry points for anybody who is walking there is improved for what it is at the moment. Okay, so in terms of longer ambitions, we know that the dynamics of the city are going to be changing in the next 18 months. We know that we've got a lovely cinema that's going to be online as well. So I think it's key to just keep on having that engagement with the taxi drivers. There are other factors as well, to be fair, that are including in some of those dialogues, which isn't as a consequence of pedestrianisation, but how the taxi policy operates within the city centre. So we've done the taxi rank in the bus stops pretty much straight away, so that is official, and only LDC Hackney carriages can rank in there. And that's one of those other factors that we're also considering. But I think whilst those conversations are still going on with the taxi representatives, that we are considering alternatives and making sure that it works for both, you know, as best as it possibly can.
That and the first question, I'm likely to be worrying unnecessarily.
But so can I just bring Kerry in for that particular one, and then we'll come into the
so we will investigate that. However, I think as Councillor Sylvester Hall has articulated, the taxi representatives themselves recognise that an official rank is required, and there are other factors at play that are convincing the taxi drivers of why that is important. Obviously, we'll be putting a traffic regulation order that will be a legal instrument in terms of the use and the permits of that road. So I'd fully expect that to outweigh any historical rights. However, we will double, triple check that.
It's probably worth checking. I don't even know whether it applies, but it may.
We will, and just to kind of follow on, as Councillor Sylvester Hall has said, we're looking at alternative options, and our regulation and licensing team are currently pulling together that options appraisals and looking at pros and cons of different sites. And as part of that pros and cons and appraisal, obviously reflecting on the feedback we've had from taxi drivers, also reflecting on kind of business requirements and residents, especially thinking of safety and personal safety, and looking at different journey times on foot to different options as well. So all of that is being considered in the round of options appraisal. But as we've articulated in the paper, officers have had very clear steer that we need an official rank in place by the time the bollards are installed.
Thank you, Kerry and Councillor Strachan. I think that was a good idea to raise that point. I'm sure Kerry will get to the bottom of it, make sure. Do we have any more questions or comments? Councillor Cox.
Yeah, it's a follower on taxis, because I think obviously, you know, I can go back a little bit further, and we used to just have one taxi company try and filter everybody out of Lichfield, and I think it would take till about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning before its last passenger out of Lichfield took place. So obviously I welcome obviously that we have those taxis, and they are licensed from the district council. I think there's a growing worry, however, with the Uber taxis over getting involved here and how we manage them. Is that something that comes under this particular?
I think that when I alluded to some of the outside factors, that we're also having a instrumental part to what we're trying to do with the taxi rank. And that covers the regulatory and licenses side, not necessarily as a direct consequence of pedestrianisation. That's part of the feedback that we've been relaying when we've met with the taxi driver representatives. And in fact, at the last meeting that we had in here, we also made sure that all the officers who were relevant and needed to be aware of that information were present to do so. The only other part that I would add to some of what we've done, we had obviously the most recent road closures in the city, which meant that taxi drivers had to relocate out of Ball Street and moved over into the old bus stops. And we were able to make sure that it was a rank at that point as well. But one of the other things that taxi operators had requested, representatives had requested, was that we'd facilitated marshals. So wherever we possibly can, we have been able to respond very quickly to facilitate what they're doing as a safe operation for them as owner operators usually, as well as for people who are using their facilities as well. And simple things such as having a matrix sign pointing people into the right direction of where they needed to go have all been a useful opportunity during that time. And I have to say again, a big thank you to the officers for being extremely quick in their response to some of those requests.
Okay.
Excellent. Yeah, I think if there's no more, I'm looking around there. No, we're good. Yeah, I just wanted to raise that. Yeah, I take your point, Councillor Cox, actually. And for me, we probably need to step back and see why we wanted to do pedestrianisation in the first place, which actually for me was we wanted to reduce the cars driving around the market square where it's quite tight and we've got the thing there, and obviously reduce vehicles down the Bird Street, Market Street, where we seem to be getting more and more Rezu, Breach, etc. down there. Okay, I'm confident, given this report, that the automatic bollards on Bird Street will do that job down there and therefore down Market. Works for me. I would just like reassurance from the current member that we will be ensuring that in terms of who has access to the Bird Street, it's most definitely only anybody who definitely has to deliver down the front there, and they have an alternative to deliver down the front there. Yeah, either they can't get around the back or they can't have alternative. So in other words, to reduce that as much as possible, I think that's good. And maybe even conversations about timing, even though we're not making that official, would also be useful with our and to go together with our street license. In terms of the Market Square, obviously moving the taxi rank will solve the evening problem with lots of taxis driving around the Market Square, obviously. Okay, so that sounds like we're on top of that, and that's done. So that then leaves us with the ability for badge holders to park onto Ball Street, which I think through what we've been through, for me, if we can continue doing that, then that's a good thing. If we can prevent the drive around Market Square to get there, that's an even better thing. Okay, so I support continuing with the blue badge down Ball Street. So that leaves us with the two-way entry on the end of Ball Street. And for me, that's really important that we get that bit done to complete this project. So I know we had your assurance that we're going to go all bore ahead, excuse the pun, on getting that done. But in your opinion and likelihood on what we see, maybe you or Kerry, what's our timescales on getting that two-way entry as it completed? Because for me, that's when the project is actually finished.
And in reverse order, I think it is a case of that this is another milestone along the way. But I thought that it was important that we're considering at this point the rising bollards, that we also needed to make sure that we factor in still the Ball Street exploration. And potentially if we are able to get the two-way enabled. So at the moment, we're still going through the reporting side of things. And in a moment, I'll ask Kerry if there's more detail on some of the other physical civil alterations that need to happen with the realignment. But potentially looking at taking between 70 and 80 cars, who are the blue badge holders in particular, coming through the city on a daily basis, that will be able to access Ford Street from the other way around. So although I think we've made a really positive impact on the amount of vehicles that are currently driving through, many will say, well, that's not pedestrianisation because we still have people coming through, but we will have the need for vehicles, and especially those who are permit holders, to be able to access their property in some cases within the city. So that's always been a bit of a challenge on there. So Ball Street, absolutely, and that's one of the distinct recommendations, that we also make sure that we give regular progress reports on those explorations. It's going to be ongoing. Is there anything you want to bring in at that point on the timeframes?
What I'd say is we are somewhat in the hands of our close partners, Staffordshire County Council, in terms of the speed of being able to move forward with Ball Street. Hence why obviously the Chief Executive has made a direct approach to the Chief Exec at the County Council, because we realise what a priority this is, and therefore we wanted to make sure it's the inbox of the Chief Exec at the County Council as well. So we will, as officers, continue to push our colleagues over at County Council, because we recognise the political steer on this.
That's great. Appreciate. Thank you both on that. I appreciate that. I am reassured. And then there's just the Bird Street.
Yeah. So we've been able to capture some really helpful information from the gate staff for the daytime operations. And I think it's quite clear to be able to see that when we don't have those in place, it exemplified the need to have that physical barrier, being able to access the city at any time, because each of those stakeholders that we've mentioned this evening can do so at any time. The proposed permanent traffic regulation order. Or being able to access Bird Street in particular, that whether it's delivery drivers, whether it's permit holders, we will have two systems that I believe will give us a good level of dialogue between each of those. So if it's a permit holder who is able to obtain a fob, then we know exactly who those are, and we can make sure that their access is what they are using it for, and not for necessarily parking, which I think has become more apparent during the evening times, and especially on weekends as well. And the same for deliveries as well. So if we've got regular deliveries that we're coming through, and again, we've noticed a slight pattern in terms of when those deliveries are taking place now. The majority are taking place before 1 o'clock. That we can also make sure that we've got an opportunity for dialogue when issuing those pins, and also for when they are changed, so that we've got a regular update on those, so we can maintain some level of control over the pins and who's using them. When people press the intercom, so if it's ad hoc delivery, then we already have established, and we have done for a number of months, strategic points across the city centre where, for example, the Uber Eats delivery drivers that you mentioned specifically are encouraged to go to park to, outside to the rear of Lloyds Bank being one of them. Sanford Street, I believe, is another one. So key places between the city areas where they might need to go into. And again, they're providing a service, but at the same time, those key points are there for them to be able to go very quickly, park the cars there, or whatever vehicles that they're in, collect their ware, and then carry on their deliveries. And I can see a number of those are actually taking place, but equally, I think when it comes to the nighttime side and we don't have our gate staff there, it does mean that probably be far more effective in the enforcement of those than what we have been. And enforcement is very much part of what we're trying to do. So as well as the rising bollards, as I mentioned some time ago, it is about how we look at it holistically, and enforcement will be part of that too.
Right, thank you, Janice. I agree. Kerry.
I was just going to add that point that Janice has just finished on. Really, there's three key elements and strands of work to implement the TRO. The rising bollards is one of them. Enforcement is the second, and communications and ongoing communications. So again, while a cabinet member, we've talked about the need for ongoing engagement with the businesses in the pedestrianised zone, kind of talking them through again of what we're trying to achieve with pedestrianisation in terms of that vibrant cafe culture, and work with us on that. So again, thinking, as you've mentioned, Councillor Smith, about deliveries and how might be able to facilitate deliveries in a different way as well. So communications enforcement and the bollards are the three key strands.
Yeah, okay.
And if I could just do a shameless plug at that point, if I may, the Lichfield District Council web pages for the pedestrianisation scheme contains a lot of really helpful information. It shows the consultation that's taken place, but it also explains absolutely clearly as to what the ETRO involves, and also the contact mechanism for anybody who does need to get in touch.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you for the info. In that case then, I think we have no more. If you want to just tell us your recommendation in section 2 with the modification you need to make to 2.4.
I do indeed, yes. Let me just put that one back on the correct screen a moment. Oh, and for the benefit of making sure that we do have absolute clarity on this one, I will take my time to just read them out as opposed to just giving the numbers. So recommendation 2.1 to approve the current ETRO in Lichfield City becomes permanent traffic regulation order TRO. 2.2 to delegate the approval of a contract for the supply and installation of a rising bollard system within the Lichfield City Centre to support the implementation and management of the TRO to the Cabinet Member for Visitor Economy, Ecology and Climate Change and the Chief Operating Officer, subject to costs being within approved budgets. 2.3 to note the progress on and provide feedback on the feasibility of the Ball Street realignment. And then 2.4 to task the Cabinet Member for Visitor Economy, Ecology and Climate Change and Chief Operating Officer to continue to progress discussions with Staffordshire County Council on Ball Street realignment and report back to the Cabinet.
Thank you. Can I have a show of hands, please? That's approved. On that note, we have no other business this evening, so I'll close the meeting minutes past 7 o'clock.